Hello and welcome back to the 7.3 notes. This is a video about addition of real numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding real numbers. So remember, that's any number on a number line. And we're actually going to use a number line to help us do that. We're going to find opposite or additive inverses of real numbers. And we're going to solve some applied problems involving addition of real numbers. So the first thing I want to do is talk about addition of fractions, okay? So this fraction review here, the one thing I want us to write down is that we need to make sure that we have what's called common denominators, okay? Common denominators. Okay, and the common denominator is in a fraction you have on top you have the numerator, and on the bottom you have what's called the denominator. Okay, so we're looking at the bottom numbers, when we're dealing with common denominators. So what we have to do is we have to look at this, and we have this number 1/6 plus 2/9. Okay, and if I wanted to add these together, I need to turn the 6 into a 9 and the 9 into a 6. And what we do is we look at the multiples. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write out the multiples of 6 and multiples of 9. Okay, so multiples of 6, I go 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and then 36. And I'm going to stop there, okay? For 9, my multiples are going to be 9, 18, 27, and then 36. Okay, so 36 is my common multiple, okay? And this is going to be my common denominator. All right, so what I want to do is I want to say, okay, I have to take 6 and I have to multiply that by a number to give me 36. Okay, and that number is going to be 6 itself. So I'm going to do 6, but when I do that to the denominator, I also have to do that to the numerator. Okay, and then the flip side is that when we multiply fractions, we just multiply these across. So 6 times 1 and 6 times 6. Over here for 2/9, to turn 9 into 36, I have to multiply that by 4. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do 4/4. Okay, so what happens as a result, if we do this math here, I'm going to do 6 times 1, that's just going to give me 6. Okay, if I do 6 times 6, it's going to give me 36. So I'm going to put 6/36, and then I'm going to add that to what we do over here. So I'm going to do 2 times 4, that's going to give me 8. So I've got 8/36, okay? And when I have a common denominator, what I can do is I can then do, I do 6, and then, let me write that better, 6 plus 8 all over 36. So I write those two fractions as one. I keep the same denominator and I add the numerators. So then what happens is I get 14/6. Okay, I get 14/36. Sorry. And that's my answer. Now what we can do is we can also simplify that a little bit. And let me do that down here. So let me do 14/36. And each of these numbers are divisible by 2. Okay, so if I do 14 divided by 2, that's going to give me 7. And then I'm going to divide that by 36 divided by 2, which is going to give me, and that's going to give me 18. Okay, now there's no other number common number that I can divide each of 7 and 18, so I just leave it like that, and that's my answer. Okay, no, it's kind of jumbled around here, but we only have a little bit of room on the paper, so sorry about that. Okay, let's do the next one real quick. 5/8 plus 7/30. Now I'm going to move over here a little bit and kind of, draw some room, and I'm going to do the multiples of 8 and then of 30. Okay, so this is going to get a little interesting here. What I'm going to do is do 30 first. I'm going to do 30, 60, 90, and then 120. Okay, and I'm going to kind of stop there because sometimes you have to think about this for a second and you go, okay, am I really going to multiply all of these 8 by all those different numbers until 120? I'd be writing out a list of numbers over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this number 120 and I'm going to divide it by 8 because I think that 120 divided by 8 is going to give me an even number, okay? And it's actually going to give me 15. Okay, so I could write all this out. You know, I have all these different multiples here, 8, you know, yada, 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 all the way up until I get to 120. Okay, and what I know is that if I take 8 and multiply it by 15, that's going to give me 120. If I take 30 and multiply it by 4, that's going to give me 120. Okay, so you know, kind of a little bit of a, you know, trick there to kind of understand, you know, what, you know, once you list out some numbers, you go, okay, which one of these are going to be divisible by 8, okay? I can't take 30 and divide it by 8. I can't take 60 and divide it by 8. I can't take 90 and divide it by 8, but I can take 120 and divide it by 8, okay? And it's 15. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that for the numerators and the denominators. And let me do a 4 up here. Okay, so then what I want to do is I want to take 15 times 5, and that's going to give me 75. Okay, so my next step down over here, I'm going to get 75 over 120 plus 7 times 4 up here is going to give me 28. Divide that by 120. Okay, and then what I can do is I can just add these two numbers together up top, 75 plus 28, all over 120. Okay, and if I do 75 plus 28, that's going to give me 103, okay, over 120. Now, these numbers here, I don't think I can divide, there's no common number that divides those. So we leave it like that, okay? There's no common number that can divide into 103 and also divide into 120, okay? So we just leave our answer like that, okay? And that's how we add fractions. I just want to make sure that we understand that the concept of a common denominator. These questions are kind of tricky. They're kind of, you know, a lot of steps, but, you know, that's that, okay? Let's quickly talk about what it means to do addition on a number line, okay? Now, what I want to do is go through this and say, all right, to do addition of, say, some number A plus some number B on a number line, we start at 0, we move to A, and then move according to B. So if B is positive, we move from A to the right. If B is negative, we move from A to the left. If B is 0, we just stay at A, okay? And I want you to think about something, okay? Let's say that you have $5, okay? And this is how I kind of think about adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, okay? And let's just write this down over here, okay? You have $5, all right? You have $5, and then you owe your friend $7, okay? If I were to translate that into an addition problem, what I would do is I would say, okay, I have $5, and then I'm going to add negative $7, okay? Meaning that you owe someone $7, all right? And so how much money would you have, okay? Would you even have any? And if you think about it, you're like, well, no, I wouldn't have any. I'd owe someone $2, okay? And so that's how I kind of think about positive and negative numbers. And so if we go over here and I model that for you, and if we start at 0, you know, if we think of the phrase 5 plus negative 7, then what I want to do is I want to start and move to 5. All right, so start at 0 here in the number line, and we move 5 units to the right because this is positive, okay, and that means we move to the right, okay? And then if we subtract off 7, okay, or add negative 7 to that, this means we move to the left 7. So I'm going to start here at 5, and I'm going to go count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's where I stop. And that number there is -2. Okay, and so that's how I would do this, and I would say that if you add those two numbers together, you get -2. All right, so let's look at a couple of examples here on how we do this using a number line. So what I want to do, the example that I have is I want to take 3 and add the number -5 to it. Okay, now when I have this is the same thing. So the same as saying 3 minus 5. Okay, these two things mean the same thing. When you add a negative number, it's the same thing as subtracting. Okay, now let's go ahead and just do this. I'm going to start at 0. Okay, I'm going to count over. I'm going to start at 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, plot my point. And then what we're going to do is we're then going to subtract 5. Okay, we're going to move 5 units to the left. So I'm going to then do start here at 3 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, coincidentally, we still get -2. Okay, and that's that. And that's how we use a number line. And that's one of the easiest ways that I can explain this to you, and one of the easiest ways that we can do this. I'm able to do this all in my head, but sometimes it helps to have a number line. Okay, so always if you want to draw a number line, you can do that. Okay, let's do another one. This one, we're adding two negative numbers together. Okay, I've got -4, and then we're going to add -3. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at 0. We're going to move to -4 on the number line. So I'm going to start here at 0, and I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, stop there. And then, since I'm adding -3, what I want to do is I'm going to move 3 units to the left. All right, so then I'm going to come here, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to go -1, -2, -3, and I'm going to stop. And that number that we stop at is -7. Okay, so this is equal to -7, and that's it. Okay? All right, on the next one, let's take -4 and let's add 9. So what I want to do is I'm going to start at -4, and then I'm going to add 9. So let's start at 0. Let's move 4 units to the left, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then I'm going to add 9 to that. So I'm going to move 9 units to the right. And so I'm going to start here at -4, and I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's that. Okay, and we end at 5. Okay, now I also want you guys to think about something here. What if I did this? What if I did 9 plus -4, and I switched these around and kept an addition symbol in between them? Okay, I want you to think about that, because we're going to use this concept a lot. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start at 0. So we can just do this again. And I'm going to go start at 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move 2 units to the left. I'm sorry, 4 units to the left, and go 1, 2, 3, 4. And we end at 5 that way. So we actually get the same thing if we reorder things when we add them. So when you add things, you can reorder them. It doesn't really matter. The hard part is kind of dealing with your negative numbers here and making sure that you know that those are negative. Okay, and being correct with those. Okay, all right. So one thing that we can do is add these numbers in our head without the use of a number line. Now, guys, here's the deal. If you're really comfortable with using a number line and you're like, hey, this makes sense, this is a fail-proof way of me getting these right every single time, then use the number line. Okay, I have no problem with you guys using the tools that I teach you to help you. All right, but let's go ahead and talk about some things that you can do in your head. And I kind of, oftentimes do think of the number line in my head to do this. All right. So what I want to do is go over the rules for addition of real numbers. Okay. So if I'm adding positive numbers, add the same as arithmetic numbers, the answer is going to be positive. Okay. If I add negative numbers, okay, kind of like what we had in this example here, okay, where I added two negative numbers, what I do is I add the absolute value. So I just think of like, okay, well, what's 4 plus 3? Okay, that's going to give me 7. Since both of them are negative, it's going to give me negative 7. Okay, and I just make my answer negative, and that's what that means. Okay, now if you add a positive number and a negative number, okay, if the numbers have the same absolute value, the answer is 0. So if you add a number and its opposite, you're always going to get 0. But when you have different absolute values, okay, and we're going to kind of look at a couple of these examples, like, like this one, for instance, okay. If the positive number has a greater absolute value, then the answer is positive, okay. If the negative number has a greater absolute value, then the answer is negative. So if I look at, what they mean by that is, and let's look at this. This is an example here where the negative number has a larger absolute value. So if you think of just like the number 36, disregard the negative, that's going to be larger than 21, okay? So because this number, the absolute value is larger, this number 36 is bigger than 21 and it's negative, that means your answer is going to be negative, okay? And then, if we think about something like this where, if you look at 9, 9 is larger than 4. 4 is the one that's negative, so your answer is still going to be positive, okay? That's what this means here, okay? And that's it, okay? So let's go ahead and let's add these without using a number line. So if I think of like, if I'm doing negative 12 plus negative 7, then what I have to think about is, okay, well think, what's 12 plus 7? What's that? Okay, that's going to give me 19. So, but if I'm adding two negative numbers, then my answer is going to be negative. So then if I add negative 12 and negative 7, this is going to give me negative 19. Okay? And you can still do this on a number line. If you really, really, really are struggling with this, start at 0, count over to negative 12, okay, and then move to the left 7 more. So here's negative 12, here's negative 7. That brings you at a total of negative 19, okay? You can do that, all right? I'm not saying that you can't do it. Sometimes I will provide you with a number line, but other times you'll have to just write it. So if I don't provide you with one, you can still use one. You just need to write it out yourself and think about it, okay? All right, moving on. On this one, negative 1.4 plus 8.5, because 8.5 is a larger number than 1.4, and this number here is negative, if I add these together, it's going to give me a positive number. Now, the other thing that I can do is this. I can say 8.5 plus negative 1.4. All right, I can do that. I can write that. So, but I can also think about this. If I'm adding a negative number, that's the same thing as subtracting. So it's really just 8.5 minus 1.4. Okay, and subtracting these numbers without using a calculator can sometimes be a little tricky. This is going to give us 7.1. Okay, and you can check that with a calculator. Okay, and do it with a calculator. All right, and you can type in negative 1.4 plus 8.5, or you can type in 8.5 plus negative 1.4, or you can just do 8.5 minus 1.4. All right, and this is what I typically do. When I see this, I automatically just know I'm going to subtract 1.4 from 8.5, okay? So, all right, moving on. Let's take a look at negative 36 plus 21. So here's what we've got. Because 36, the value of 36 is bigger than 21, and this is the one that's negative, okay, when I add negative 36 to positive 21, we're going to get a negative number. Okay, now if you think about it, think of a number line, all right, just to kind of, help you understand where you're at here. Start at 0, okay, over here is negative 36. If you move 21 spaces to the right, your number is still going to be negative, and this is going to be positive, all right? And so what's that number going to be when you add 21, all right? And the way that I do that, if I were to do this in the calculator, would be I would just do 21 plus negative 36, okay, which is the same thing as me doing 21 minus 36, okay? And to do that, because some of these guys I'll be 100% honest with you. These are hard for me to do in my head. And a lot of times I need a calculator to kind of verify what I'm thinking. So, so what I would do, just in your calculator, I'd do 21 minus 36. That's going to give you negative 15, okay? And so that's your answer. All right, if you had an actual number line, you'd be easy for you to count these. But, I want you to be able to take this and rewrite it as something else that's a little bit more familiar to you, that's easy to punch into the calculator. Okay, you can still punch this part into your calculator, but rewrite it as a subtraction problem. Okay, all right, let's move on to the next page. All right, so let's jump right in here to some work on fractions. And so, one of the things, I wanted to talk about, just adding and subtracting fractions before, we jumped into like positive and negative numbers. So one thing that we can do here, and let's take a look here. You've got negative 3 halves plus 9 halves. Now you already have a common denominator of 2, and that's good. So we don't have to manipulate this in any way. We can just go ahead and add our numerators. So what I want to do is I want to do this. I want to take, write this as negative 3 plus 9 all divided by 2. Okay, and if I do negative 3 plus 9, that's the same thing as me doing 9 plus negative 3 over 2. Okay, and 9 plus negative 3 is the same thing as doing 9 minus 3 all over 2. Now 9 minus 3 is just going to give us 6 over 2. And then 6 divided by 2, and that's what a fraction is. Fraction is just a division problem, is just going to give us 3. And that's our answer. Okay? And that's it. All right, now okay, let's move on to the next one, because the next one doesn't have a common denominator. So let's think of the multiples of 3 and 8. So let me move it over here to the left side, or right side, I mean. Okay, multiples of 3 and then 8. And so 3 is going to give us 3, 6, 9, 12, 16, or not 16, I'm sorry, 15, 18, 21, and then 24, okay? Okay, so we wrote out a lot of numbers there, and I kind of already know what the common denominator is going to be, but let's write out the multiples of 8, and that's going to be 8, 16, and then 24. Okay, and so 24 is the number that we're looking for. Now what I also know is that 8 times 3 is equal to 24. So one of the fail-safe ways that you can always find a common denominator is take the denominators and multiply them by each other. That will work every single time. But a lot of times you might get some big numbers and you don't need to do that. So there's a way of kind of thinking about it. Sometimes you have to do that, but not every time. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to multiply this by 3 over 3. So 8 times 3 gives me 24. And then I'm going to multiply this by 8 over 8. Okay. Now, when I multiply 8 times 2, that's going to give me 16. Okay, so I've got 16 here over 24. Now, this value of 2/3 is negative. Okay, so I'm going to make this a negative number here. Okay, now I can put the negative either in the numerator or the denominator. It doesn't matter. Typically, what'll happen is I kind of always put it in the numerator. That's just my preference. A lot of times when you see like a fraction here, the whole thing is going to be negative. So when you have negative on the outside, 2 over 3, that's the same thing as having the negative in your numerator or your denominator. It doesn't matter. We'll kind of talk more about that in the next few sections. Okay, and then we're going to add this to 5 times 3, which gives me 15, and then over 24. Okay, so now what I can do is I can say, all right, well, I've got a common denominator of 24. I'm going to do negative 16 plus 20, plus 15 all over 24. Okay, so negative 16 plus 15. All right, I don't know what that is yet, but let's rewrite it. So I've got 15 plus negative 16. And those, when I add those together, this is all over 24. I'm going to do 15 minus 16 over 24. Now, if you think about it, if you have $15 and you subtract off $16, how much do you have? You have negative $1. You're going to have to owe someone a dollar, okay? And so this becomes then negative 1 over 24. And that's the idea, okay? So that's that. All right, now let's look at adding consecutive numbers here, okay? When you have a number of these that you have to do. What I do when you have to add a bunch of numbers, like more than just 2, you move from left to right, okay? So I'm going to add 15 plus negative 2 first, and that's really 15 minus 2. So 15 minus 2, that's going to give me 13. And then I write out each next step. Then I do plus 7, plus 14, plus negative 5, plus negative 12. Okay, so then I repeat the process and I start the next two numbers. So now I've got 13 and 7. If I add those together, that's going to give me 20. And then I'm going to add 14. I'm going to add negative 5. I'm going to add negative 12. Okay, so if I do 20 plus 14, okay, 20 plus 10 is 30, plus another 4 is going to give me 34. And then plus a negative 5, and then plus a negative 12. Okay, the next thing I want to do is 34 plus negative 5, so that's really 34 minus 5. And if I do 34 minus 5, that's going to give me positive 29, and then plus a negative 12. Okay, and if I think about 29 plus negative 12, if I think about 29 minus 12, take 29 and subtract 10, that's going to give me 19, and then subtract another 2, that's going to give me 17, okay, and that's my answer. So hopefully you guys are able to kind of do this, you know, in your head and do this, but if you need to use a calculator, use it, okay? However, there's a caveat. Try in your head first. Try on paper, okay? So try on paper, okay, and then check with a calculator. All right, you're going to have to think, guys. All right, your brain can do this work. Okay, do not rely on your calculator. So try it first, and then check with your calculator. Okay, and sometimes you kind of have to develop your own way of, like, you know, thinking about these things versus, you know, what I teach you or whatever. You know, I'm trying to teach you a number of different ways to do it, but you know, you kind of have to just do it. All right. So, and this is just something that's, you know, you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. These are, you know, real world skills here. Okay. So now the other thing I want to talk about is opposites or additive inverses. Okay. So two numbers whose sum is 0 are called opposites or additive inverses of each other. So opposites really is another word for negative. Okay. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a second. So, but, you know, think about it for a second. If you had 34, if I wanted to find the opposite or additive inverse of that, you know, I'm just looking for the negative value. So if 34 is my number, the opposite of that is going to be negative 34. And that's it, okay? And vice versa. So if you're given something like this where you're like, okay, well, what's the opposite of negative 8? That's going to give me positive 8, okay? And that's what we're looking for. All right, what's the opposite of negative 7/8? Positive 7/8. All right, and that's it. Okay. All right, let's take a look at some sort of real world example here. It says on August 1st, Marshes checks his bank account on his phone and sees that it is $54. So he has $54 in the bank. During the next week, the following transactions are recorded: a debit card purchase of $71, an overdraft fee of $29, a direct deposit of $160, and an ATM withdrawal of $80. What is Marcia's balance at the end of the week? So what we want to do is we want to take this and use these words to put it into context. Now think about your bank account, okay? What's the one thing about your bank account that's important? Is that you have money in your bank, okay? And so, one of the things is like, let's say you are this guy, Marcia's, which is, hey, whatever. I don't know what ethnicity that is, but it's just kind of, I've never seen that name before. Anyway, so you have $54 in the bank. Okay, that's a positive number. Okay, so I'm going to take 54, and during the next week, a debit card purchase of $71. So what happens when you purchase money, okay, or when you use money, when you spend money? The amount of money in your bank account goes down. So I need to add a negative $71. So I'm going to add negative $71. Okay, you could just subtract it. Okay, and then what's going to happen is that you're going to have an overdraft, all right? And then you're going to owe the bank money. So the bank, does this thing where it's like, hey, if you have money in your bank account and you spend more than what you have, well, then we're going to charge you an extra fee for doing that. They don't want you to do that. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, now I'm going to add or subtract out another $29 from your bank account. Okay? And then, let's say Marcia just needs to, this is the $71 thing was a necessity. It was like a phone bill or a gas bill or something like that. Who knows? And then they get paid. Okay, they get $160 direct deposited back into their checking account. So I'm going to add $160, and then Marcia what goes to the ATM again, and then takes out another 80 for cash. Okay, so then we're going to add negative $80. Okay. So if I do 54 plus negative 71, all right, let's see what that is. 54 plus negative 70. It's going to give me negative 17. So once you spend this money here, you have negative $17. And then you're going to add another, take off another $29. So then all of a sudden, so let me do this. Now, minus 29 plus 160, and then plus negative 80. Okay, so then when you add these two numbers together, that's going to give you negative 46, okay, plus another 160, and then plus 80, or negative 80, sorry. So negative 46 plus 160, that's going to give me a positive 114. And then when you add another, or take off another 80, then you get 34, okay? And, these guys, I would try and do this in your head, but I would, just go ahead and use a calculator if you need to, okay? And that's the thing, guys, you do this, your personal finances, are you operating within positive and negative numbers, okay? And that's a fact, all right? So you guys use this stuff all the time. You just may not realize it. And we're kind of writing it in a unique way by adding a negative number. Okay, so your homework for this section is 1 through 63, every other odd. Please take a look at the homework solutions to help you when you're going through your homework. So good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.